This is testimony that would profit from spontaneity. It's not going to be very spontaneous. But a society that proclaims in whispery innuendos that have no substance or confirmation to them that women were wronged by a deaf poet as an explanation for bombing thousands of children should unplug their pretenses and reflect on themselves, because none of the rumors that were mongered had any justification, nor have they ever come across in any form other than anonymity and informality and hype. It is concluded by social networks that because nobody likes me, I therefore did something wrong. Well, I received a spate of important letters from important people back in the late 80s. And I'd like to talk about that. Some of them actually in the early 80s. And they have surprising angles and dimensions to them. Not least because things developed around me as I read them and tried to understand them. I had my own ideas of what was going on, but I still didn't grasp all of it. I hadn't unearthed the letters of Gail Burstyn, an Israeli, sent to me in the 70s, or suspected them yet. They were in childhood effects among memorabilia in the basement with the old Victrola machine, the crank record player. And the generation before me took an interest in me. Robert Fripp wrote me a couple of postcards and invited me to West Virginia, where I met characters from the crowd around Ouspensky, who was a hardcore anti-Bolshevik fourth dimensionalist from the 1920s, who associated with Gurdjieff during Vichy French era in Paris. And Peter Gabriel opened up to me a great deal with 3 years of letters while I saw the inside production of So, sometimes considered a pretty good record by people. Learned about who Sledgehammer was about, the influence of Anne Sexton, and the themes going on beneath the surface in an art form by a lyric poet who doesn't ever really say exactly what he means, for fear of being overexposed or being revealed for what is bothering him, which was what Anne Sexton was about. She was very convoluted and discreet in her messages. I read all of her poems, and the impression I got was that her father had abused her. But it was very, very subtle. I got a letter from Eugene Sledge, which surprised some people who study military affairs. They know about his book, With the Old Breed. Why did he write to you? They sort of curiously. Well, Sledgehammer was his nickname, and obviously he had less artifice about him than Genesis, but his quandary was like Anne Sexton. He was trapped in a world he never made when it came to the military because he fought in Palulu, only to discover that it was a theater operation for no reason at all. There was no strategic reason for it. He got into a lot of cat and mouse with the Marines about military censorship as he tried to explain to people his indignation at what had happened. He talked to me about my hearing loss in the Japanese, I guess. I had written to him and told him who I was. The person who wrote me the longest letter in those days was Martha Gellhorn. She's the woman Ernest Hemingway dedicated For Whom the Bell Tolls to. She was Eleanor Roosevelt's best friend. She was the correspondent for Collier's magazine in World War II, escaped Helsinki with the president of Finland on skis when the Russians invaded, stowed away in a Navy boat to Europe, slept with men who were doomed on the front, went into China, saw the Russian army invade Berlin, the liberation of Dachau. An excellent writer who threw herself in my path in Montana by reprinting through the Atlantic Monthly her book The Face of War and Freddie's Feed and responding to me very promptly with obvious address concerns that I was raising for fear that I might be right. Walker Percy wrote to me a sort of codified letter about bewaring the delectations of despair, is what he said. And Louis Lapham came to my neighborhood. So these were the big wigs of the Roosevelt administration's grip on American benevolent society. And they contained about them both the confirmation that something was very serious going on and the odious, toxic web of the libels that Israel was visiting on me with the help of King Crimson, making me, through whisper campaigns, appear to be unwelcome and lecherous. I don't see how they could get away with it in light of the truth of the matters, but involved in the whole condition that spun this web. But it was clearly a production service. Media has been overthrown by Hollywood. And now they're just telling a story, calling it establishing a narrative. And they operate by omission. They have a feed that causes people to believe that they've been told what they need to know, and they look no further. And that's a devious way to centralize the omission of the standard duties of journalistic reporters. I mean, censoring the press by disfiguring the face of the press, by castrating its services, by removing its reason to exist, which is the pursuit of evidence and testimony that illustrates what is most likely to be believed about what happened on the basis of concrete, confirmed, peer-reviewed details. So this peer group that lobbied me was a quite astounding group of celebrated individuals. Jim Mars wrote me quite a letter, actually comparing me to Galileo. And of course, I met the horrible Roseanne, which meant that Trump knew what was going on, because her voluptuousness comes from the tune parade of creatures. But I trusted all of them, and so I abandoned prudence. And of course, I needed a friend. I didn't have any friends. I needed to tell her what had happened. I needed somebody who believed in me. Because Martha had questions that she felt were not answered by my communications. Gabriel had raised more dirt devils, spitballs, than anything I would have imagined somebody calling themselves Amnesty International would pull. And of course, Yoko Ono was playing industrial warfare with me as the target. Her fascist gopher, Amanda Harcourt, was behind what Rosa did to me, which was to attack me in an implanted neuroplasm that they evidently all knew was there. I'm not sure Martha knew, but the implications are pretty parched, onerous and parched. It shows a very different storyline, if you will, about the rumors and whisper campaigns that were going on with me. Turns out they used a personality change chemical that I was resisting. And how did Seattle finish me off after taking all of those letters from me? By forces of extortion and terror and trauma and homelessness. They set me like a tape that's going to self-destruct in 5 seconds on the road to dementia by Parkinson's, while building what they called momentum for the extermination of Gaza, defending the same little rat finkery that Ono's gopher Harcourt was always soft on. The Nosferatu people, Netanyahu people, the Trumpy-tuned Putinese of the oligarch culture, who were not only aware that I was telling the truth, but were inside on what I was telling the truth about and steaming to justify it. And that's where they played the old switcheroo, where the attackers claimed they were the victims through this bizarre whisper campaign about the enemy within. The letters were bursting. Edna Ray Galuli changed her name to Ellen Burstyn when they made The Exorcist, because they were playing a game behind the scenes where Hollywood was a mirror of reality. Is it real or is it not real? And then suddenly it switcherooed with media, and media started playing a storyline. And they've been planning this from 1919. The word "Sir Production" is in Ouspensky's writings in the New Age magazine. So I found out and did a lot of research. But if I go into a nursing home, it's going to be hard to continue with the research. I'm still looking for someone who is genuinely interested and being my peer and understanding these matters. Which brings me to the heartthrob of the little girl in Gaza. She's a poet. I wouldn't necessarily believe that she would believe in me, but I do believe in her. I came across something that it may have been garbled. She may not have written it, but the timing was very pure. She said, I have a conviction that each person is a rain. I immediately said, who is this person? Who's in the midst of the Talmud and months into this atrocity? And she was showing her gifts of perception and articulation. Seldom have I ever been so taken or put in a swoon by a person so admirable and talented and timely that I gasped. The profoundest of fellowship. I pity Gaza terribly. I know that Martha Gellhorn, for those who know her, was up against some indignation among her friends, acolytes, and peers regarding her determination to stand for Israel through thick and thin because of what she witnessed in Dachau. And I believe that some of the tragedy visited on me was her last reluctance to find them in fault. She took out that reluctance on me, battering me like a woman, as though I was a woman, battering me, a battered woman. In fact, the Abused Deaf Women's Advocacy Service made an exception and took me as a client. In the old Seattle routine, defending Israel, they promised me protections from abuse and then tortured me and castrated me and gave me Parkinson's. That's what Seattle did. And Adwitz was here. But it shows you how battered I was. I had my face pressed to the cement, my ocular gyrations. One pupil would get huge and the other would get small. And I was being interrogated by the media. Did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it? Because Fripp was dropping his pick and saying virginity proved rape. What did I remember? It was buried in this neuroplasm. Was a freezing cold day where I couldn't go to school, and the Pittmans found me anyway in a stolen car and kidnapped and gassed me. And Pitt's whisper campaign was saying that I was hiding a defiant trespass. All my girlfriends were consensual when it came to lovemaking or not lovemaking. All of them were. The only pick that was dropped was that I dropped King Crimson. That's my pick. It's my favorite band. And that was hard enough, I guess. In fact, it was so hard that Clint Eastwood's been casing me. It's ridiculous. And in the name of Andrea Swimmer was a local call girl hooligan. She jumped off the stage from the cast of Hair and lunged at me. It's preposterous. Jaime Carminel making secret tapes of a Pitt News editorial journalist and getting away with it to the brink of World War III? Who do these stupid fucking yinzers think they are? Stupid people. How hard is it to understand that one of the reasons why you protect the rights of the accused is because they might be wrongfully accused? How stupid are these brilliants in King Crimson that they don't understand that?